Sure. So again, good morning and welcome to SPARTA. Today's guest is Zheng Bo, who's currently based in Hong Kong. So this is why we're doing this talk quite early in the morning. And Zheng Bo is going to talk about the relationship of human and plants, and in particular the political potential of plants and their empathy.
Yeah, hi also from me. Same procedure as every time, so we have like a 40-minute talk and then have a Zoom Q&A afterwards. So you can start now.
You can hear me, right? Okay, yeah. Thank you for inviting me to have this chance to talk about my work, and also I very much look forward to the discussion. I will describe my journey working with plants. I was interested mainly in humans before 2013. I was working on social engaged art and relational aesthetics. And this image you see here was taken in 2013 in a place in Shanghai. So I was invited to participate in a large exhibition in this on this site in Shanghai. I was going there to look for a building to show a video work. But when I went to the site, this is what I see. So it's a huge factory built in the 1920s. It's a huge cement factory. It's built next to the river, so things can be moved in quickly, conveniently. And then the factory was moved out of the city a few years before to prepare the city to be the host for the Shanghai Expo, to clean up the city. I think it happens to many cities around the world, transitioning from industrial to post-industrial sites. So there's a gap between when the factory was moved out of the site and the district government deciding to transform this site into an art and design area. So now if you go to Shanghai, I'm sure as an artist, you will go to this area. Now it's called West Bund. It's where the major museums are. But when I went to visit the site in 2013, I saw this really beautiful patch of weeds. And I was completely taken by it. This is very central in Shanghai. I didn't expect to see this landscape. So I decided not to show the video work I was going to show, but rather to think about ways to save this patch of plants, because the organizer was going to get rid of the plants and pave it with concrete to use it as a place for concerts. So I talked to the curator. We were able to save the plants here. And then I worked with actually my cousin's son, who is a landscape architect in Shanghai, to identify the plants. He didn't know all these plants because, for people who study landscape design, they tend to know more standardized plants. So he actually helped me to post images on chat group, so people online will help us to identify the plants. We were able to identify about 20 to 30 different spontaneous plants. So we label them and turn it into what we call a found botanical garden. So that's what's on site. I also decided to make an online course with my friends in Shanghai. I already started teaching, and I have friends teaching in different universities in Shanghai, teaching different subjects like ecology, literary studies, cultural studies, etc. So I convinced 7 of them to join me to make an online course. Each will give a lecture, and then the whole course was about the relationship between plants and the city of Shanghai from different angles, from ecological angle, but also from history of literature. I think I decided to do this because I didn't know much about plants. I was, this is really the first project I started to think about plants. So I also needed a way to learn quickly. So by getting my friends who teach in other disciplines to join me to make this course, I think we learned together to think about plants, how they are, how they are related to the history of the city. So we will post the online lecture. So it's in 2013 when people were starting to make online courses. And we were also thinking about how to integrate it into an art exhibition. So for the exhibition period, every week we post 1 lecture online. And then on Sundays, we will hold activities on site. So we invite people to come to the site to do something on site. So this is the first project in the summer of 2013. So I started, I made this quite dramatic change. So I completely changed the focus of my practice in 2013. And then I was interested in politics since when I was a kid. I was born in Beijing, I grew up in Beijing, and I always say people who grew up in Beijing are somewhat cursed because we live in such a politicized site. So what we think about often is politics, or the narrow definition of politics, human politics. So I started to work with plants, but my interest was in how plants are involved in politics. This is in 1991, October 1991, I was in high school. So this is on Tiananmen Square, the center of Beijing. On October 1st, our national day, we always have these large propaganda made with plants. So the slogan you see here, if you read Chinese, it's very simple. It says, socialism good. It's a slogan that has been around since the 1940s, 1950s. This is 1991, so the slogan was still used. I don't think that slogan is used anymore, or maybe it will come back. Let's see how the current politics plays out. So these designs were made with plants, and I decided to remake this. So this is a version I worked with planters to remake in 2016 at an exhibition at the Cass Sculpture Foundation in UK. It's the same design. The difference was once we plant the plants into the ground, we don't intervene. So it's the same slogan. And so 2 weeks late, pretty quickly, weeds started to grow up. So you can see in the middle of the character, there's one plant, weed or spontaneous plants. So you see them quite clearly in this picture. here, and then 2 months later, you see more, of course. So the slogan, the human design became a backdrop for the weeds, for the spontaneous plants. I was thinking, of course, how, when we had the slogan, socialism good, of course, we were only thinking about socialism among humans. So how do we move beyond this view of equality? So I think this is just this is only a gesture. It's not really, I'll talk about later works. I think I'm still working on this. This is just the first step to make us aware, using a slogan, using sort of a propaganda to make us aware of the political ideas we have been working on for the past 200 years, or even longer, have left out plants and animals and other forms of life. Not always, I can also talk more about this in the discussion. Historically, there were people thinking about other forms of being when they think about politics. So this is in 2016, 3 years later. And also at the same time, around this time, I also made paper-based work. I copied a book of a plant manual. So I call them the survival manual. So this is the book I copied. You can see it has 64 entries of plants. And these are edible plants, but edible weeds in Shanghai. So the occasion of, this is, I copied this the book was made in 1961. Okay, so you can see if the entry looks like this. You have a drawing and some basic information where it grows and how it looks and how it can be eaten. I'm sure you've seen books like this now. I'm sure foraging is a pretty popular thing among young people these days. This book was published in 1961. So for people who know Chinese history, you would know why this was published, because in 1958, we had a political campaign called the Great Leap Forward. So the head of the Communist Party, Chairman Mao, he thought we were going to leap into communism. So it was a huge political experiment, and then it completely failed. So in 1961, there was huge famine. Many people starved to death, and the book was published on this occasion to help us, or my parents, etc., to some extent survive. And so I think we turned, I think I copied the book, and also I learned about this book, and I think it made me aware that when we have political crises, we will turn to other forms of being. I mean, I'm sure the pandemic can be seen in this light. We can have a discussion later too. So I copied this book. I can talk about copying, why copying a book, etc. But this is the historical context. And then in the following year, I went to Taiwan. So for people who know this part of the world, Taiwan is somewhat separate from mainland China. The status of Taiwan is not clear. But anyway, Taiwan is an island off in the South China Sea. I went to Taiwan, and I was doing a residency there, and I encountered a book I encountered this book. So you can see it's very similar. It's also edible plants with entry, with drawing and information. So this book was published in 1945. I'm sure everyone can think of the occasion. So it's the end of World War II. The book was published in March 1945 in Japanese, not in Chinese, because Taiwan was a colony of Japan at the time. And Japan was aware that the Japanese forces, they were aware that they were going to lose the war in March. So they published this book, thinking about maybe they'll go into the mountains to survive. And so it's very similar to the 1961 book. But what's interesting is this is the first entry. The book contains 100 entries. This is the first entry in the book. It's a fern, and this is not okay. So the first entry is, let me see. Let me see if I can. Yeah. So this is the first entry. The very first few entries are all ferns. I copied the book and then I realized that ferns are so important to Taiwan's nature, but not many artists have worked with ferns in Taiwan. For some reason, these plants have been ignored in cultural representation. And then I realized, because Taiwan was first colonized by Japan for about 100 years, and then by migrants from mainland China. So only the indigenous communities in Taiwan are very intimate with ferns. You know, I went to their New Year celebration. They will be dancing, and then they have decoration with living plants as part of their fashion. So because Taiwan was colonized by different populations over 150 years, and they didn't know so much about local plants. So the cultural representation is quite disjoint from the local habitat. So I decided to do something with ferns, which are really important for Taiwan. And I didn't want to do more. I didn't want to do more sort of paper-based work on research. I thought I needed to. You know, you can see the first 3 projects I just talked about. They're all kind of research-based, and I wanted to get closer to the plants, to not only think about their politics intellectually, but also more bodily. So I had this idea to make sort of an erotic sexual film, so that we'll be in the forest, we'll actually touch the plant, like kiss the plant, etc. To be much more intimate than just sitting there talking about them and sitting about, talking about them or intellectualizing about our relations. And I knew a scientist who took me to this forest, and it's a beautiful place, as you can see. This is just outside of Taipei, the capital of Taiwan. And I was thinking about how to make this film, and I mean, the first part was made in 2016 with 6 people in this short film. And it's more tender, and we were just trying things out. And I was invited by Independent Art Space. I wasn't sure if they're okay that I would show erotic films, so I didn't tell them what I was doing. And also, it's more like there's no explicit genitalia, so I was trying out things. And then I made a film. I was very happy with what we did, but I also thought there's a lot more to do. So I went back in 2 years. Sorry, the caption is not right. It should be 2. So I went back in 2 years and made the second chapter. So this time it was much more explicit. So you can see the performer really having full sex with the plant. And then he starts to eat the plant. There are several reasons that the film had this narrative, but one very basic reason was because this plant was edible. It's a very common delicacy in Taiwan. I'm sure if you go to Taiwan, local friends will take you to restaurants and you will eat this plant. You will eat the young leaves of this plant. It's edible. And everyone, I mean, not everyone, but many people eat it. So while he's having sex, he's eating this plant. And whenever I show this work, people get sensitive about ethics. Whether we have consent from the plant. We can talk about this if people are interested. So this is chapter 2, and then chapter 3 was made with 3 people who enjoy SM sex. So I've been to the forest twice already. Each time we would spend a week there, but I didn't realize actually for ferns there are also plants with very very spiky thorns. So only when we were making chapter 3, with 3 SM people, I realized there are actually ferns with thorns. So I think it's very symptomatic of our relationship. If we don't look for something, we don't see it. So I think by making this project, of course, every time I learn something about plants and different aspects of human sex, and also thinking about how to engage different forms of life in a sexual situation. So this person likes to he's more a dominant person, and then the person this guy, he likes pain, and this guy is a bondage practitioner and master. So 3 different forms of SM sex. And chapter 4 was made in 2019 with 2 relatively young guys and working with young leaves or fronds. I'm sure you have seen young leaves of ferns, and then they're always curled up, and it's very beautiful. People say violins are inspired by this design, etc. So we have, as humans, we have been fascinated by these sort of mathematical designs for a long time. So we made this part to thinking about. There's a genre of comic called boy love. It was started in Japan, showing young boys, or not young boys, but young men in love, and then it becomes very sexual. The original readers will usually be women, but now it's a much wider readership, and it's not just in Japan. I'm sure in Germany, you can find comics called boy love. So when we were making this chapter, we were thinking about sort of a boy love inspiration between men and plants. So the last chapter I made was earlier this year, and it's looking into not exactly microscopic, but more of the zooming in to see the details of the skin, the spores. So I'm sure people know ferns don't produce seeds; they produce spores. So they propagate differently from flowering plants. So these are the way they propagate, and so it's about our relationship with spores, and also finding different textures. So this one, you can try to figure out which part of the human organ this was, and also semen. So thinking about the way to propagate. So the project hasn't finished. I think I will do at least one more chapter. So it started in 2016 and has grown kind of like a plant. It has grown over the past 5 years, and then I'll go back to the same forest to make a different, different sex, where also different plants and different people. And I have really enjoyed this project because it's slow for us humans, but of course it's not that slow for plants. It's still 5 years. It's a very short time. And also allows me to do something and then think about something more in the future, and then keep working on this. So I have time to learn, to think. I'm not pressured to finish this project in a short time. So the work has been shown in different ways. So this was in Sicily in Palermo. So it's shown in a botanical garden. When I was there, it just happened. There's a cat looking at the screen, maybe. And this is how it's shown this year in Liverpool with a multi-channel projection. I've also shown it together with scientific footage of sex between bees and orchids. If there's time, I'll talk about it later. Okay. So that's the film. And then last year I was in Berlin and I started a new project. So this is just the first chapter of the project. So it's called The Political Life of Plants. So you can see in the previous film, I was thinking about still the relationship between humans and plants. So in the new project, I'm thinking just about, I try to get rid of us in the picture. So the film was made, the first chapter was made in Grumsinn, outside of Berlin. It's beech forest from the last ice age. It's a World Heritage Site. It may have been there for 12,000 years. I was told the reason it was intact during the GDR period is because it's a hunting ground for high officials in the GDR period. So that's why the forest was intact. So if people haven't been there, if you go to Berlin, I highly recommend going to this forest. So I work with a cinematographer. We were there for a week and we experimented ways to think about the politics in the forest and also how to kind of show a little bit of that on film. I was also looking at early Soviet cinema. So you can see this image of the tree. You can see it clearly is inspired by the early Soviet cinema. Because I thought, because I think the artists, the filmmakers then, they were thinking about how to give agency and subjectivity to the proletariat, to the workers and farmers. I think what I'm doing is to give agency and subjecthood to plants. I think this is a much harder film for people to understand what's going on or to sort of speculate what's going on, because I think we don't think about the politics of plants. So we don't even know what to look. I think I'm just starting this, and I don't know if people have seen this work in the exhibition in Berlin and how much you can imagine, because I think I'm just starting the project. So for me, I'm proposing this line of inquiry to start to think about political life of plants. I'm sure people now think about social life of plants. Books by the German forest person, Peter, I forgot his last name. He has this book about the secret life of plants. And Suzanne Simard, a scientist in Canada, has talked about the collaboration between tree roots and fungi network. So the idea that plants have social life is, I think, now moving into the mainstream. What I'm trying to do in this film is to say plants not only have a social life, they also have political life. But I think it's a very difficult project. Like I said, it's just the first chapter. I need more time to do. And to help me a bit in this project, I also talked to different scientists. So in the film, I also have two conversations, one with ecologist Matthias Rillig. So we talk about the relationship between tree roots and fungi. And we also talk about, it's not just collaboration, there's also competition, there's also killing in the forest. So the politics is not something just romantic. And also I challenge him because I think the idea that plants have a political life is also not something that he thinks about as a scientist. They want to, they want to use so-called scientific language to be objective, and rather than giving agency, subjectivity to other beings. So it's also my way of pushing him, but he's very, I'm very grateful to him because as a scientist, he's very open to having this dialogue, to think with me. And then, I learn a lot about what he knows about plants, and then I push him to think politically. So it's very productive. And this picture shows me talking to another scientist, Rusa Lehtinen. She was in Berlin, but now she's teaching in Helsinki in Finland. Yeah, Helsinki, yeah. So she studies the plasticity, meaning adaptation of plants to different environments. So I thought was fascinating, because when we think about climate change, how do we address climate change? We tend to focus on behavior. So we try to travel less, we don't drive cars, or we don't eat meat. But for plants, when they think about a different environment, they actually change their bodies. They don't just change their behavior, they literally change their bodies. So this idea of changing bodies and changing behavior, of course, they're linked, right? You can see changing body as the starting point could be considered behavior, etc. So I think that the discussion was very inspiring. I don't know how this will go. There's also danger, of course, of slipping into eugenics, historical experiments of changing our bodies and genes, etc. Let's see. So in addition to making the film, I continue to do something. I try to do something every day. So in Hong Kong, so that, like these films are more time-specific project. We'll go to the forest for a week or 2 weeks. What I try to do as an artist is also to do something a bit every day to maintain a daily practice. So in Hong Kong, this is where I live. So I will go up the hill and then I'll sit with plants to draw. So last year, because I stopped traveling, so I was able to draw more. So every day I'll go up the hill to make one drawing. But actually drawing was just a way to sit with plants. So for me, I think sitting with plants is actually the real thing I'm doing. Drawing is just a way to keep me there for a while. Otherwise I get distracted and I'll just leave. Okay. So I showed these drawings at the Gropius Bao in the exhibition this summer. I also wanted to show these drawings on a horizontal surface, like a traditional way of seeing Chinese painting. So you wouldn't see everything. When you get into the room, you have to sit down and look at things quietly. I also try to do all my exhibitions now to bring the viewer's body to the ground. I think when we are low to the ground, we feel much more rooted and grounded, like plants. So these are the drawings, and so it's 1 year of drawings, and also for the exhibition in Berlin, it's not just what's inside the museum, it's also what's outside. So for people who know Gropius Bao in Berlin, you may know there's a parking lot next to the building. If you don't know, next time when you go to Gropius Bao, you should definitely check out the parking lot, which is what this picture shows. There are actually about 100 plane trees. So in summer, this picture was taken this summer. So it's a little forest next to the building. So Gropius Bao actually has a small forest, but it's not in people's consciousness. It's also not in the art institution's way of thinking about Gropius Bao. So I wanted to push both the public and also the institution to really consider these trees part of Gropius Bao. So I worked with an architect, and we designed this small platform. We occupied part of the parking lot. So like I said, the parking lot has 100 trees, so you can see there are about 10 trees. So we occupied just 10% of the parking lot, build this small platform. And so for the exhibition every day, I bring I will lead people to do some exercise with the trees. So based on traditional qigong practice, and also, maple dance or drawing practice. So I'm also collecting ways to do bodily exercise together with other with plants. So this is part of the project in Berlin. And another project in Berlin was a meeting I organized called the Wanwu Council. So I invited 11 other members to join me to form a Wanwu Council. I'm sure you know art institutions have like supervisory boards or advisory boards. I wanted to create something to channel the voice of other beings, like plants. So we formed this Wanwu Council as a 12-member council. We met for 3 days, and each person would channel different forms of being with this scarf. So the one on the right side is Ebola bacteria. So it's given to a scientist, Regina Hengi, who studies microorganisms. So we met for 3 days, artists, scientists, architects, activists, gardeners, etc. So each of us would channel different forms of being, and then we developed actually 4 versions of a manifesto to think about how an art place like the Gropius Bao can move towards a more than human future. So this is only just the starting point. So this is one of the manifesto. I'll just explain the details. So first, the name of Gropius Bao can be changed to Gropius Baum. So for German speakers, I'm sure you know it's B-A-U-M, it's a tree. This is not our idea, it's actually suggested by a viewer of the exhibition, by a public member. And then this, if you read the ideas here, it says Gropius Bao should be seen as organic art form. It should be not only for art exhibition, but also for gardening, for educating, for healing, for cooking and nourishing. It's also for shamanic healing. There should be a Wanwu Council with power to represent other forms of life in the governing structure of the art institution. We should establish environmental personhood to protect the rights of Mother Earth, including the Gropius Hain, the small forest outside the building. We should reduce footprint to 3% of current level, because there's on the rooftop of Gropius Bao, there are solar panels which generate 3% of the energy used by the art institution. We should also make reparation to Mother Earth. And the roots of the plant here, you see there's commenting, there's ethos, there's celebrate life and renew. There's also the idea of good life. Okay. So this is one version of the manifesto we developed. So we did this meeting in August this year. It's just the starting point. We also talk about a very easy thing to do would be composting, etc. From very concrete things to do to more philosophical, larger directions our place should take. And also at the end of the meeting, the idea is 3 young people in Berlin, kind of like you. One is studying at the Berlin, as a young artist in Berlin. 3 young people should organize the next council meeting, or something that they think should be the continuation of the project. I'm sure you have all followed the COP26, and I'm very aware that the movement, the climate movement, the ecological movement are really the most progressive force is young people. So the next council meeting will be organized by young people, not by me. Okay. So it's So this is a pretty quick view of a few projects that I've been doing. So just to give you a flavor, and I think I'll just say I'm still just starting. You know, there are so many things to learn to do, and you know, even in Hong Kong where I live, it's a small area. There are more than 2,000 different species of plants, and of course, you know, it will be millions or even billions of individual plants or different communities. And you know, I don't even have time to learn about animals, to learn about bacteria, fungi, etc. I think, you know, whatever life I still have remaining, I will only know just a little bit about other forms of life. And I think many of us are now trying to think of ways to really move out of our human-centric worldview mindset to think of ways to work with other forms of life. And also to reactivate indigenous wisdom so that we don't have to reinvent everything. But I really want to say is, you know, I'm just starting. There's so much to do and there's so much to learn. And these are just some of the experiments and some of the ways to learn things, to try things. And it's just the starting point. Okay.
Great, thank you so much. Okay.
I'll stop the share. Yeah.
Leave it on and switch.
Should I leave it on? Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I would say let's meet at 55 and you all can join our Zoom meeting. I'll post the link in the description and then we just continue with the discussion. But do you want to add something? Okay. Yeah, looking really forward. Will be interesting.
Mm-hmm. It's the same Zoom link, right?
Yeah, it will be the same Zoom, so we can just mute ourselves
so I'll join,
and wait for some couple of minutes. Okay, all right.
Sure.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sure.